Welcome everyone that is joining us, that is popping in here. Be sure that you say hello in the chat with us. Let us know where in the world you are watching from. We're excited to meet you all. We're going to get going in just a minute as we wait for a few more people to arrive. And as you all are settling in, grab your favorite cup of anything because we've got an amazing evening planned for you. You've got your cuppa. I forgot my own cuppa. Look, everybody's got something. So don't forget to comment in the chat where you are tuning in from. And also just to take note that tonight we will be taking questions. So if you have a specific question, be sure that you use the Q&A. There's a separate icon for the Q&A as opposed to the chat. The chat we get to have fun in. I get to see that you are in Long Island. Welcome. Welcome, Christina. And Christina, I know you, Christina, from Long Island. Rob in San Fran. Hey, we got Byron and Mariah here. Lisa, Dallas, Chicago. Awesome. So excited. You guys are all here tonight. We have an hour of optimism and joy planned for you. Hello, everybody. We got Australians. We are global, everybody. So I want to get us started because we have so much goodness waiting for you this evening. First, my name is Shari Alyse, and I am the Joy reporter for the Art and Science of Joy for our Year of Joy, which we want to thank you so much for being a part of this. And I'm going to introduce to you in just a moment the creators of A Year of Joy. But for those of you who just popped on, I'm going to say one more time to make sure that any questions you have tonight that you place in the Q&A, and then just have a good time enjoying and engaging in the chat. And be sure to stay till the end because Noirin and Victor have it's a crazy Australian Irish thing, something that they call the wild mic. And anyone that wants to come on camera at the end, ask a question or anything, it'll be a free for all in the most fun way. So be sure to stay tuned till the end. But without further ado, I would love to introduce to you the creators of, the co-founders and creators of A Year of Joy. I'm going to introduce first to you, Debby Schlesinger-Hellman. Welcome, Debbie. So amazing to have you here.
Thank you, Shari. Oh my gosh, this is fabulous. Our first live event of our Year of Joy. So let me welcome everybody to this event. A little backstory for those who might not know much about the Year of Joy and may have just learned about this event and come on board. So Andrew and I have created this platform with a number of other people who are supporting us to give to as many people who would like to join a free year of building your joy muscle. We want you to be able to build some joy for yourself, knowing that collectively, all of us together are going to make a difference in this world. So Andrew and I have come up with a recipe for joy. 4 core ingredients of well-being, belonging, positive impact, and of course, some fun. And we're going to have some fun tonight. There's a place where you can join if you haven't already joined our Year of Joy platform, and we'll tell you about that as we go along. But right now, I'd love to introduce to you my co-founder and creator, Andrew Cannon, who is going to tell you a little bit about our 52 weeks of joy and how you get started. Andrew, off to you.
Thanks, Debbie, and thank you, everybody, for joining us this evening, this morning, this afternoon, wherever you are in the world, or even in the middle of the night, if that's your thing. Absolutely no judgment on what you do. Yes, I'm Andrew Cannon, and it's really been my pleasure to work with Debbie and a whole team, as well as a whole heap of partners who have enabled us, including Innovate MR, who are kindly hosting the webinar tonight. So a quick shout out to them. The Year of Joy really is founded, as Debbie said, upon this recipe for joy. And the foundation of that is a tool we call the Joy Barometer. So those of you who are already in the community should have received your link to the Joy Barometer, which will enable you to get your own joy scorecard, which should give you some guidance as to which parts of your life you're doing really well on, and which parts of your life you could maybe use a little help building your joy muscle with. And those, as Debbie said, would cover those 4 pillars of well-being, belonging, positive impact, and fun. But they go a little bit deeper than that to help you get a bit more granular in where that would be. And once we got that level, then we really drill down each week to a different, what we call joy superpower. So the research we've done has identified that actually there are a really large number of things that make us joyful. And so we're not offering a one glove fits all recipe for joy, but rather presenting everybody with what we would call a smorgasbord of ingredients which enable everybody to pick and choose what works for them. But there are some things that are foundational, and one of those is optimism. Optimism really is foundational to being joyful, of having a sense of joy in your life. So that's one of the reasons why we're really excited to kick off the year of joy with a week of optimism, and even more excited to have Victor and Noirin be the people who will guide us on this journey, because Victor and Noirin run something called the Center of Optimism, which is such a fantastic resource for the world that's been created to help people not only find optimism, but then work with it to build their optimism muscle. And Victor, is the founder and the chief optimism officer of the Center of Optimism, has had a fantastic, very diversified career. It would take me a long time to go through all the things that he's done in his life, but he's been in politics, lawyer, business, all over the place. So he's got a wealth of experience and knowledge which he can bring alongside his optimistic attitude. And Noirin, well, what can I say about Noirin? From Ireland, which is a gift of joy in itself. Nothing more joyful than the Irish, in my opinion. They're always up for a good party. And Noirin's, made her way to Melbourne for a variety of places, Bangkok, but perhaps inspiringly, Papua New Guinea. Not many people have probably been there, so maybe Noirin will tell you a little bit about that. And she's worked all over the place too, including like insurance, disability, wall art, and my favorite one is slot car racing, right? So believe it or not, Noirin is an expert in slot car racing. So if that's your thing, Noirin is the person to talk to about that. So I'm super excited to welcome Noirin and Victor to do this. So over to you, Shari, to get the show going.
All right. Well, yes, as Andrew just mentioned, we've got amazing Victor Perton, Noirin Mosley. I would love to just ask you straight off the bat, what is, in your definition, what is optimism?
I'll jump in there, Shari. Thank you. It's lovely to be here. Thank you for having us. Look, at the Center for Optimism, our definition is steeped in reality, because the world is real and things are really happening in the world, and we need to acknowledge that and be real in that space, but also be optimistic. So our definition, there's a modern one and there's an older one. So the older one basically defines the modern one, and the older one goes all the way back to the 14th century to a town in England called Norwich. I think, Andrew, you might know this place. And Mother Julian of Norwich was legendary. She was a mystic. She lived through the worst of times. She survived the Black Death. She was unbelievably ill herself, survived, unbelievably ill again, survived plagues, the lot. But she was an eternal optimist, and people looked up to her and they were inspired by her. And her phrase, which, as I said, forms the basis for our modern definition, was all shall be well, all shall be well, all manner of thing shall be well. So in time, give time, and all shall be well somehow. Just hang in there, I think, was our kind of interpretation. And the actual definition then that we use at the Center for Optimism is a belief that good things will happen, and that things will work out in the end. And if they don't, it's not the end. You keep going. So that's kind of the broader kind of overall definition. I mean, we we love everyone and anyone who actually describes themselves as an optimist, who believes in optimism. And, you know, there has to be joy in that space. There has to be joy in the definition of optimism. So whatever it is, so long as it's positive, it's forward-looking, and it's joyful, then we all nod very, very much in agreement with people's definition.
And I love that you pointed her out and that quote, because I think what it shows for all of us is that no matter what is going on, no matter what challenges that we're facing, that we can still choose to believe that all is well and that things will be okay. Victor, I'd love to know why it is that people are so interested right now in optimism more than ever.
Yeah, it's the science is incredible. About 4 years ago, Harvard, the American military, and Boston University published an astonishing study on healthy longevity. And they defined that as living to 85 in good physical and mental health. And, you know, when they started the research, they expected it to be wealth or income, you know, geography or genetics. And what was astonishing to them was that the trait most associated with healthy longevity is the trait of optimism. And, you know, they were actually confused by the result. You know, how is this so? And then a whole lot of other universities and the American Heart Association, you know, which is headquartered close to you, the world's biggest organization for heart surgeons, cardiologists, you know, nurses and professionals working in that field, put together a scientific panel. And actually, the panel suggests that optimism is the key protective trait against the three major mortalities in the world, against heart disease, against cancer, and it even slows down the progress of dementia and Alzheimer's, and it is the key predictor of recovery. So if you're a heart surgeon, you're a cardiologist, you're a cancer surgeon, the optimists are more likely to survive. And what Noirin and I have been doing with some of the major hospitals here and the like, is the doctors actually get the science, what they want is the practice. How do they make themselves more optimistic, and how do they transmit that to their patients? And, you know, we go on, you know, in modern leadership, you know, the chairman of Rio Tinto, who was the CEO of McKinsey worldwide, he says every great leader he's ever met is infectiously optimistic. But it's not the big man or woman speaking from the podium, it's the person who can unlock the optimism in the team. And we've done research on strategy. You know, the 400 leading world strategists say strategy has to be optimistic. You know, you want your organization to be better at the end of the strategic period than it was at the beginning. And then innovation, Shari, you know, everyone's trying to be more innovative. You know, innovation's all about failing. Does anyone here have a Dyson vacuum cleaner? Yeah, Dyson, you know, famously had 5,000 models of the bagless vacuum cleaner before he achieved success. Yeah, he could have stopped after 10 years. He could have stopped after 12 years. And we would never have had the bagless vacuum cleaner. And then resilience, Shari. You know, the research around resilience says, you know, you can build dikes to stop the floods. You can build fire shelters. You can do all sorts of things. But the key to resilience is in the heart of people. You know, it's a belief that by persisting, you're going to make things better, as we said earlier. And so what we do, Shari, is we actually don't lecture people on why they should be optimistic. We help them to find their own optimism, because optimism is a state of mind, not a state of the world. So I'd love to ask each of you three, and of course ask Noirin as well, what makes you optimistic? So Shari, what makes you optimistic?
When I think about optimism in my life, it's always, my optimism muscle has increased by simply looking at my life experiences. And every time that, so I always say, like, instead of waiting for hindsight, I actually now trust that everything that has happened to me, every challenge that I've been through has ultimately worked out for me. And I have seen the better that has come from it. So seeing that and knowing that allows me to continually look and believe that everything will be and is okay.
Brilliant. Andrew?
For me, it's people, ultimately, Victor. We read the news and we maybe scroll through social media and we get this impression that the world is going to pot and full of horrible people. The reality I see when I step out into the world, when I'm building the Year of Joy, when I'm talking to people, is there are millions and millions and millions of people who are doing good in the world, either in a big way or in just a little way, just helping somebody who drops something or somebody who falls or stumbles. And there are so many acts of kindness, so many good people trying to help other people in this world, that gives me the optimism. It's a different reality I see in the world when I interact with it than the impression I get when I pick up my phone or get on my laptop to look at what the news are reporting. Not to say that these things aren't happening, but we get really just engulfed in that negativity, where there is another side of this, which is that the world is a good place and it's full of people with good hearts. And that makes me optimistic.
Andrew, you sound like Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, who these days is the leader of the free world. So Zelensky was on Fareed Zakaria on CNN, and Zakaria said, how can you stay so optimistic in the face of such evil? And just like you, Andrew, Zelensky said, because I believe in people. I believe in the people of Ukraine. I believe in the people of the world, because together we're going to, defeat that evil. And all of you who are listening in and online, please share what makes you optimistic as well. And people have got questions. We'll get to the questions. Srikant's already put a question up there. Use the Q&A button. But my question is to Debbie. Debbie, what makes you optimistic?
I think what makes me optimistic are the little things in everyday life. Walking down the street and someone smiling at me and me smiling back. Someone offering a hand when you need one or a shoulder to lean on. Those things make me very optimistic. I am optimistic generally in a bigger way that humankind is made of kind humans. And that gives me hope, which is optimism. And my hope is that we continue to make more humans kind humans.
No, utterly. And yesterday, the New Zealand Prime Minister announced her resignation. And exactly like you, Debbie, she mentioned kindness and she mentioned optimism. And I still think her great contribution to the climate debate was saying you can grind yourself down to inaction through pessimism. But she said, we've got the technology, we've got the willpower. Now it's time for a plan and for action. And when I think of Jacinda Ardern as a global leader from a tiny little country, it's that big-hearted kindness and optimism that you've talked about. So we don't advocate people changing their lives to become more optimistic, but it's really important to adopt some little habits. So for instance, the Vienna Medical School, again, whether it's sleep or the like, optimists sleep better. And they advocate little habit changes. And the point you made, Debbie, is our number one habit of an optimist. Smile and say hello to everyone. So what I'd like to just now ask Noirin, just to share 3 or 4 of those habits. And then we've got John Tickell, the quite famous author of Laughter, Sex, Vegetables and Fish. He'll explain that title when he comes on board. Robert Masters, the great strategy, will draw them into talking about how they've applied it to cancer treatment and the like. But Noirin, what are those 3 important little habits that people could adopt from today to make themselves more infectiously optimistic?
Thanks, Victor. Well, as you know, and the panel knows from discussions, I'm not a natural optimist, unlike you, Victor. I'm a learned optimist, and that's a very important point to sort of reinforce as well. It can be learned, and it's so worthwhile going on the journey I have. And I find a couple of things. There are a number of habits. I will talk about 3 briefly in a moment, but just another little tip that I'd like to pass on as a learned optimist is you can actually qualify your optimism. So you might say, oh gosh, I don't think I want to say I'm an optimist. It sounds a bit strong. You can actually lean into it in all kinds of gentle ways by actually describing yourself with the optimism that you most align with. So in my case, I found that I was very much a realistic optimist. That's what I said. I thought I'm an optimist. I'm a realistic optimist. And then also my other little pet name for myself is I am a worried optimist. So I'm a bit of a worrier, but I do believe that if you give time and keep going, that things will work out in the end. And you can also worry. That's okay. It's part of who I am, but also be optimistic. So that's just a little tip in terms of buying into what optimistic sort of angle or description that you want to have for yourself. Just choose a little bit of you and attach it with the optimism. That's just one tip. The other things are just day-to-day habits, little things, really little things, like actually just smile more. When you're going out, and this is hard for me because I'm sort of like, I really had to work at this, but it's actually quite incredible. It's actually quite magical. You're walking down the street and you might catch someone's eye, just smile at them. They will always smile back. Well, most times they will. And you know what? It lifts them and it lifts you. And you just don't know how many people you're kind of touching gently as you just smile. It's really quite magical and very easy to think about and do. The other thing is be conscious of your circle of friends, maybe. I mean, we all have family that we love, and sometimes it's hard to be around them. Sometimes it's easy to be around them, but they are family. But you can also limit a little bit of your exposure to people who maybe bring you down and maybe make you feel a little bit, sort of sad or anxious. Still have them in your life, but be conscious of how much you expose yourself to them. And maybe, bring in some new folks. Like, we've all been to events and things, and we think that person was so interesting. Gosh, I really felt uplifted. Reach out and say hi to them. Maybe improve or increase or differentiate your circle of friends with people that lift you up more, because it will lift you so much more to be surrounded by them. That's the second tip. The third one is the good old news, right? We've all had chats about this morning, and we will have chats about this forever probably. A lot more bad news than good news on the radio. Hard to absorb, hard to kind of go about your daily life when you feel the world's about to fall in. So maybe just, regulate your news. So maybe in the morning, after you get up and do some nice things for yourself, just turn on, listen to a few different things. You got to know what's happening in the world because we're realistic optimists. And then after that, get on with your day, because your day and your life is what's happening for you right now. So get on with your day, get on with your life, maybe check in again with the news channel in the evening to see what you've missed, and probably not a lot, but you got to stay in the loop. So there are three little habits. I would also talk about the language of optimism, but Victor, I don't know if you want to explore on that a little bit, but that's very, very powerful, just changing your language. So I might actually throw back to you, Victor, for that. And you can perhaps discuss that a little bit more.
Yeah, sure. And that's the one that's become my favorite. We actually did this in prison. I've done this with doctors, with cardiologists and the like. And in Australia, like in Ireland and in France and in Austria, and in many other countries, the typical greeting is, "G'day, how are you?" or "Hello, how are you?" And the typical response, almost 65, 70% of the time, is "not bad" or "not too bad." Absolutely takes you nowhere, and it's a wasted greeting. And so particularly with the prison crew, it was very successful. We got them to get rid of the question, "How are you?" and to replace it with, "What's been the best thing in your day?" So have a think about that, everyone. Today, just do it as an experiment, or tomorrow, get rid of "how are you" and replace it with something like, "What's been the best thing in your day?" Now, of course, if a 5 times contract killer looks you in the eye and says, what's been the best thing in your day? You are going to answer it. And it was so profound with the warders that after 3 sessions with the prisoners, we were asked to come back and train the prison officials in more positive speech, not just the prisoners. And even the other day, I was in my supermarket and the guy looks at me and he says, "You're the one that told me to change my greeting." And I sort of smiled and said to him, "Yes, that was me." He said, "Oh, look, I don't have time to listen to all those good stories." Now, the first time you do it, of course, people might stare at you, because it's so askew, making people think in a greeting. So you might have to prompt them, did you have a good cup of coffee, or, is the sun been shining? But it becomes so profound. I gave a speech at the College of Cardiologists, and they said, "Look, can you come back and join a panel tomorrow?" I said, "Sure, I can do that." And I came back the next morning. 5 of the doctors greeted me with, "What's been the best thing in your day so far?" It was so instant. And then I caught the tram home. A tram is like a cable car. And on the cable car, I had an orange mask on, and there was a bloke in front of me. He was reading his phone. And I said, "Look, I hope that's good news." And he looked up and stared at me. And he suddenly looked at me and said, "And what's been the best thing in your day?" He'd actually been in one of my training courses several weeks earlier and recognized my forehead and my eyes and my sort of jovial voice. So it does work, and I'd love people to just try it for one day. And I reckon if you try it for one day, it will become permanent. Now, listen, I've got to ask a favor of whoever's got control of the chat now. I've dropped off as a co-host. If we could lift up Robert Masters and John Tickell onto the panel, that would be really great. And we've got a really good question here, if you guys don't mind me answering this, from Shrikant Mulya. Shrikant says, "What is the difference between optimism and positive thinking? And are they the same?" And that is a really good question and a profound question. One of my favorite books actually goes back to the 1950s, which is Norman Vincent Peale's The Power of Positive Thinking. And if you go back and read that, it's actually quite modern. He talks about meditation, he talks about quietness, although these days his reputation's been a little bit trashed because he was the pastor in the Marble Church in Wall Street, and his parishioners included the Trump family. And but I always think he had this wonderful sermon where he said, "Never argue with anyone unless they're being negative, and then just correct the negativity." I think Donald Trump was probably asleep during that sermon. So positive thinking, as most people think about it, is saying that everything has a positive. Every dark cloud has a silver lining. There's a good thing in every disaster. Now, it is true that most towns that go through a disaster, community spirit, infrastructure does get better. But, each of us has our own grief. We will lose many members of our family during our lifetime. We will lose friends during our lifetime, to death. We may lose a job. We may have a business go bankrupt. We may grieve when we watch television and see a rocket going through an apartment building, whether it's in, the Ukraine or Yemen or wherever. So we're very realistic that in optimism, and Noirin pointed to it, one of the gurus was a woman who survived the Black Plague. And she said, "All shall be well," right? It's not saying everything's good today, but things are going to work out. And, famously, John Lennon, because Mother Julian has become very popular in music and poetry and the like. But John Lennon famously said, as Noirin did earlier, "If it hasn't worked out, it's not the end." And I think that's the difference between positive thinking and optimism. Positive thinking would be saying everything is for the good. But bad things happen. Bad things happen to good people. And that's why we would differentiate. So that's a really great question, Shrikant. And look, I've got a guy online here who himself is a marble. And we were talking about journalism before we got online, but Rob Masters 15 years, a senior journalist. He is Australia's leader in crisis communications. Rob, do you want to talk to us a little bit about, optimism through the tough times and why the contemporary leader needs to be an optimist?
Thanks very much, Victor. And it's a privilege to join everyone today. So I take this opportunity to thank you all. Yes, I think I'll go back one step, Victor. You just mentioned poet, and the focus of today's discussion was on joy to a certain extent. And Percy Shelley, the famous romantic British poet, wrote that the soul's joy lives in doing. And if you take that and analyze it, the underlying element of that is optimism. And this is why it becomes so important with policymakers and leaders, business leaders today, well, community leaders right across the board of leadership. They have to have not only joy, but they have to base it in an optimistic settings for the way they go about it. And as Victor just said, if you look at in Australia here, we've just gone through floods, and about two or 3 years ago, we went through bushfires, and the whole basis of everything, when you talk to the communities, their whole being is about optimism that things will get better. That they acknowledge that the hardship that they've gone through, but they all say, we'll get on with it and we will survive. So it is an underlying element of everyone's thinking. And that's why I think Shelley is so important to this discussion and his writing. I mean, he wrote extensively on joy throughout his life as a poet. But leadership today has to have a foundation of optimism, and people don't actually think about it when they're doing their business plans or policy settings, etc. It's a subconscious attitude that if I come out with this policy or if I develop this business plan, I'm optimistic about the future direction this organization is going to take. So therefore, it becomes extremely important to promote optimism in the broader context of not only leadership, but in community understanding of what optimism can do for you as a person and the community as a whole, which is what Victor was talking about earlier. So I think it's so important today that leaders embrace optimism and they understand what optimism can do with a policy setting.
Absolutely brilliant. And in terms of crisis communications, I mean, these days, we were talking again offline earlier, Shari was saying, how often in PR these days, you've actually got to use the negative to get the attention of the news editors. And, Steven Pinker, that's head of psychology at Harvard, says, the news 40 years ago was 50-50 good, bad. Today, it's 95% bad. And it's, in Australia, the number of people who are on antidepressants and anti-anxiety drugs has doubled since 2012. People are worried, as Noirin said. So how can we as communicators and everyone who's online, from Damien Tan, who's a pastor in Canaiva, to the others who are involved in leadership, how can we cut through this sort of fog of pessimism?
Well, I think if you're being interviewed, it is really a base for the interview itself, and to ensure that the journalist fully understands. Yes, we always say, if it bleeds, it leads in a journalistic world. So that's the negative. But the positive aspect is to actually talk about the outcomes, and not in a negative way, but what it will do for society, as opposed to changing that, we're going to get hit by inflation, for instance. And what does that mean? So the media will immediately go to the negative. But if you look at it, you can say, okay, we've got to have inflation, but what are the benefits of it? And this is the different thinking that leaders have to bring. It's the benefits that any adverse situation you can enhance in what you do. And the Chinese have got that famous proverb, you know, that crisis is an opportunity, not a negativity. And that's what we should be adopting. And
Bob
hopefully,
Iger, the head of Disney, Rob, has just come back as CEO. And he wrote his autobiography last year, and he had the 10 features of the contemporary leader. And you know why I'm quoting the book is number one was realistic and infectious optimism. But the second thing that the research that Disney, Coke, Adidas, the big labels have all got is that people are yearning for stories of hope and optimism. And you and Shari are professional communicators. How do you get across those stories of hope and optimism, again, through this fog of pessimism?
Well, principally from my point of view, it's showing the outcomes, the positive outcomes. Don't dwell on the negatives. Yes, you might have to have a basis for a negative, but what are the positive outcomes? And this is what people are seeking from leaders and also policies. So if they don't, it's not tokenism whatsoever. It's showing people that there is positivity out there in what we're actually trying to achieve. It's for the better. But the problem with many of them, they fall back into the negative in their commentary. So show outcome on a positive way. It's not a negative from my point of view. This is the inspiration that communities want. And you've seen the Edelman Trust Barometer, which was just released in Davos this week. And that, you know, you've got journalism at the bottom of the pile. You've got politicians pretty close to the bottom as well. But business, there is an increase in optimism in business. So therefore, it is obviously the business leaders now, or relevant to the business leaders, to set a tone of optimism in the broader community and what they're actually trying to achieve.
Absolutely, no, spot on. And you know, again, we'll bring him up later. But as I said, we've got this pastor from this tiny little town, almost in the desert of Australia, and we door knocked the whole town asking people what makes them optimistic. They then had a community dinner. And this is an idea for anyone who's running a community. You door knock the whole town and ask them what makes them optimistic. It lifts that whole community. And they ended up having a dinner, and I was meant to be the guest speaker. And of course, we went into lockdown. I couldn't leave Melbourne and I couldn't go out to their town. And they said, well, we cancel the dinner. And I said, no. So they ended up having 10 locals as the guest speakers. And at the end of the town dinner, you know, with nearly 1 in 4 people in the town in the pub, they declared themselves to be the most optimistic town in Australia. And, you know, they'd had tough times. You know, the railway station had burnt down. There were all sorts of things that had happened. And they advertised for a new nurse, you know, as the head nurse at the hospital last year. And what did the ad have in the top paragraph, Rob? It said, we are the most optimistic town in Australia. And it was a great attraction. I'd just like to ask, John Tickell is on the panel, but he doesn't have his video on. So John, I'd love you to switch your video on. Shari, you've been on radio and television the last few days. How have you been communicating that message?
I think when I speak about whether it's optimism, joy, all of that, and as Rob said, that it's about the sharing the outcome, I also believe in really sharing the truth, the journey, because people need and want relatability. So you can share the outcome and what is possible, but also people need to know that you recognize and acknowledge what they're going through is challenging and is hard. And that's what I've done in my career, just speaking from my own experience of trauma and my journey from having experienced trauma to joy. It's not just about the joy, but it's how did I get there? And then that gives people hope, and they feel optimistic that there is a path for them forward.
Well, look, John Tickell's joined us, and when I was a teenager, my mother bought his book, Laughter, Sex, Vegetables and Fish. And you can just imagine any teenager with his mum reading a book like that. And John Tickell was diagnosed with brain cancer of a huge order 13 years ago. So John, you says your journey took you from optimism to joy. Do you want to share that experience?
Victor, my history as a medical doctor changed totally when I became the patient and was diagnosed with 5 brain cancers. And I ended up in emergency. I had my seizure on a flight. And of course, the ambulance was on the tarmac waiting to whisk me to hospital. And I had the scans, and then the registrar in emergency came up to me and said, Doc, he said, you're in a bit of trouble. I think you're not a diabetic, you're not this, you're not that. I think you've got brain cancer. Now, those words are heard by 400 people a day in Australia and by 10,000 people a day in America. You've got cancer. Pretty scary, huh? So I said, well, how do you know what sort it is? He said, when I drill a hole in your head tomorrow morning and do a biopsy. So when I awoke out of my operation, the surgeon said, no, I didn't find one cancer, I found 5. So then an oncologist, hematologist said, Doc, he said, we've got a new immunotherapy drug that we've been testing in America. Would you be a guinea pig and go on the trial? He said, it's your only hope because I'd give you 15 months to live. And I said to him, let's change places. Would you sign the consent form? And he said, it's your only hope. He said, by the way, it's 70,000 a dose, but if you sign this bit of paper, it'll be free. So anyway, I started the chemo and the immunotherapy, and every time the nurse sucked the line, the IV line into my body, I smiled at it. And she said, Doctor, why are you smiling? You're on death's door. I said, well, I'm going to beat this. And interestingly, my great friend Olivia Newton-John had been 10 years through her cancer battle, and she inspired me. Anyway, the immunotherapy over 6 months started to work, and the tumours shrank, and I leaped out of bed. And it's interesting, during my stay in hospital, I started walking races around the ward. And the nurse said, you're supposed to be at rest, doctor. Your body's trying to heal itself. I said, no, I want to get the blood moving and all those chemicals beating up the little nasty cancer cells. Anyway, by the end of my stay in the hospital, there were 11 patients doing walking races with me around the ward. So optimism, and now that Olivia's passed, Victor, do you think I can I dream somebody else's dream and make it happen?
Well, you were a very good friend of Olivia, and as you know, she was an icon both in America and in Australia. So share it with us.
Well, Olivia's dream is to see an end to preventable cancers. Now, I'll give you Americans a little dose of realism. Half of your cancers do not need to happen. So America's anti-smoking laws, which are 0, kill 500,000 Americans a year, 500,000 Americans that don't need to die, because the American government makes hundreds of billions selling cancer sticks. Now, I've had a one-on-one, probably nobody else on the panel's had a one-on-one with your ex-president called Mr. Donald Trump. And I discussed this subject with him, and he said, Doc, he said, good idea, but where do we get the hundreds of millions we'd lose? Like politics is shameful. I mean, look at breast cancer now. In Australia, there's 60 breast cancer diagnoses a day. 20% of those people are under 50. Breast cancer is becoming younger and younger and younger. Yes, because of genetics, but yes, because of our kids' obesity. I mean, we've got the fattest kids in the world. What are we doing about it? So, Victor, my optimism has saved my life, and your optimism and Noirin's has got me to turn the page. Now, my word that goes with optimism is action. We've got to actually do something about it. Get the, I know, what's his name, Murdoch's son, Lachlan Murdoch, I know him. So you and I've had my own PBS show in America across 600 channels and 20 million people. We're going to get on TV across America, across the world, and start getting people to have healthy longevity. The Okinawans, I've been to 100 countries in the world, live long and healthy. Our life expectancy...
And joyful, John. Remember, they also live joyful.
Yeah, well, you don't want to be joyful when you're 100, when you've got tubes stuck in every hole in your body and you're lying in a rest home. I mean, Victor, Noirin, and the rest of you gorgeous people on the screen there, we are going to take some action and get the world full of optimism and joy. Good luck. Be in touch.
Excellent. So look, before we move to Wild Mike, Shari, I think, because I think if we can get Miss Magic, who's controlling the thing, to start drawing people up to the panel. But let's, for each of us, before we go, what is that connection between optimism and joy? And for me, you know, I think it's because optimistic people search for those good moments. We're more likely to spot things that bring us joy. You know, the American Constitution guarantees the right of the pursuit of happiness, but happiness is complicated. You know, happiness is 100 different things. You know, it's, you know, your life going right, your family going right, the weather going right. Whereas joy are these spontaneous moments that bring a sense of well-being and ecstasy. So Shari, can I ask you first, what's that connection between optimism and joy for you?
I think they're collaborative. I believe that my joy is the reason for my optimism, and I believe that optimism is the reason for my joy. Ultimately, joy for me is about connection. And so when I'm connected to my truth and to myself, I naturally know I have hope. I believe in myself. I know what is possible for me. I know what is possible in the world. And so they both support each other.
Brilliant. Debbie, you've thought a lot about this. What's the connection between optimism and joy for you?
For me, joy is this overarching feeling that I build upon. So every little thing I do will help me be more joyful. One of the many things that helps me build that joy muscle is being optimistic. That's what gives me more of the joy that I need, along with a slew of other things that, as Andrew had talked about earlier, are joy superpowers. So I think that there are many things that bring people joy. I think that we have to go deep for joy. I think happiness is outward and fleeting. And I think joy is something you build upon and it grows. And if you put the effort in, just like building your ab muscles, which by the way, I don't have, but it's the same kind of thing. You have to put the effort in and then you build that muscle, that joy muscle.
And I can see Mariah and Byron saying the connection between optimism and joy has a lot to do with energy and the amplification of it by remaining positive and spreading that gratitude. As John Tickell said, there's no point being optimistic, you don't spread it. So Andrew, for you, what's the connection between optimism and joy?
To me, Victor, optimism, and from the research we did, it's foundational to be optimistic. This belief, I think as Noirin said earlier on, that in the future, everything will be okay. And one of the problems I think we have as people is that we set these timelines for ourselves. We set these totally unrealistic sort of deadlines and things that bound us and make us stressed and feel unjoyful. And as an optimist, I believe if you do it correctly, you can release yourself from the bounds of time and say, as John Lennon, I think you said, Victor, right? It's if it's not now, it's not the right time, right? It's going to be in the future. So if you have that belief that in the future things will be as they should be, and you can then focus your energy on the moment, as John said, on the action, on actually doing things that bring more joy to your life, you will, actually create that self-fulfilling prophecy of joy in your life. And it's easier said than done, maybe, but I think we can, through this year of joy, give people the tools that can help them build their optimism as well as find their joy.
Robert Baker is in Paris or London, I think, so it's obviously middle of the night for him. And Robert's sharing this. This whole event is bringing me joy and making me optimistic that we can succeed in achieving healthy longevity. And as Dr. John says, we need to be active in pursuing our passions and purpose which contribute to this. And there's another beautiful statement from Jeff Bogensberger. My dad started every conversation in life with, "It's a great Canadian day," even in a -30 blizzard. He got cancer at 85 and now at 92 is cancer-free. So obviously at 92, his best days are still ahead of him. Robert Masters, the connection between optimism and joy for you.
I think it gets back to what Shelley said, that the soul's joy lies in the doing. And I think if you're optimistic, you go about bringing that joy to the soul and bringing that joy to the broader community. So it's a matter of understanding optimism and inculcating that into your life and to your thinking. And as John said, if you're a positive thinker, which is the basis for optimism, and you can enunciate that, as John did in getting people to run around the wards with him and various other things like that, you can overcome many things. But people have got to see, as Shari said, truth in the outcomes that you desire to have for the broader community. So it's got various connections, but for the personal being, it lies in the soul.
And brilliant. That sense of spirituality, we've got quite a collection on our website of, Christian optimism, Jewish optimism. One of the great rabbis said, God commands us to be optimistic. Or Bishop Tutu, who died recently, the hero against apartheid, God commands us to laugh. So there's a lot to be said for some spirituality underpinning that optimism as well. So Noirin, before you throw back to Shari to formally close off, what do you see as that connection between joy and optimism?
Thank you, Victor. I see so much connection, but for me, as a worried optimist and a very grounded, realistic, kind of focused kind of optimist, I find that my optimism gives me permission to enjoy the joyful moments. So really, optimism unlocks for me the joy that I allow myself to have in a day-to-day setting. And it's the little things, it is the little things, but it's actually giving yourself permission to go, gosh, that's so lovely. It made me feel so good. And going, yeah, other stuff's happening, but you know what? I've got permission to enjoy this, and it's really happening. And I mean, to quote John Lennon again, Victor, I think it was him that said, life is what's happening when you're planning your life. So yeah, having joy in the moment, being conscious of that, but most importantly, giving yourself permission to be joyful in the moment as well. That's my link.
So shall we throw back to Shari?
Yes, Shari, take it away.
Well, first, before we close out, I just want to thank Noirin and Victor. Thank you so much for helping to kick off a year of joy with optimism, with coming here with big hearts, so much wisdom, so much insight, and really inspiring all of us to remember that everything is okay, will be. And if it's not the end, or if it's not okay, then it's not the end. So reminding us about that. So thank you for that. And for all of you that are here with us today or watching the recording, we want to invite you to join us for a year of joy. 52 weeks of experts, just like Noirin and Victor, who will come on and help ignite your joy with our 52 different joy superpowers. The link, I believe, will probably be in the chat if you haven't joined us yet. We're excited and inspired to continue this joy journey with you. Because at the end of the day, as Noirin said, if we can each be present in our own lives and choose joy, whether you're choose joy and optimism, and whether you're a worried one or not, we have the choice to actively change our state of joy, our state of being. And it just starts with taking action. So we want to thank you all, and of course to Andrew and Debbie for creating a year of joy and giving us all this opportunity to be able to change and inspire and harvest more joy in our lives and in the lives of others. And to Robert and John, thank you for joining us today and sharing your thoughts on optimism and all the work that you're doing in the world.
On behalf of the Centre for Optimism, can I really, really thank you, Andrew, Debbie, Shari, and your team for making optimism the first superpower of your year of joy. All the best. We're committed for the year, and thank you very much. I pass back to you to wind up.
Just thank you everyone for being here tonight and for choosing micro moments of joy in your life and choosing optimism.